I remember the soft drone of music floating through the country club hall, the chatter of distant voices, and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread wafted from the banquet tables, drifting toward me in waves. The event was meant to be a relaxed, joyful reunion for our extended family and close friends, a place where old connections would be renewed, stories exchanged, and perhaps a few new memories forged. I was delighted to be there, at least initially, because I had just returned home from an intense deployment overseas. My mind was swimming with the good, the bad, and the in-between of my time in the army. I was prepared for the usual polite inquiries, the occasional proud handshake, and maybe a few timid questions about what it felt like to be a woman in uniform. Yet as I navigated the packed banquet hall, weaving between uncles and cousins, old neighbors, and dear friends from high school, I heard something that made my heart stop cold. My father, a man who had always been reticent about my career choice, was standing in a corner with a few well-dressed acquaintances. He was smiling broadly, telling a story with animated gestures that took me a moment to piece together. At first, I felt a spark of joy, perhaps. He was finally talking about me with pride. But then I heard the unmistakable mention of my brother Ethan, and the words deployment, commendations, and heroic service poured from my father's lips. They were my stories. He was recounting my experiences, those nights of blistering desert winds that kept me awake, those adrenaline-fueled moments in the field, that near-miss rocket attack I survived during my second tour. He spoke of them in such detail that it couldn't be a misunderstanding or casual slip. But he attached them, piece by piece, to Ethan. My father was proudly announcing that my brother was the Army hero of our family, that my brother was the one who had endured all those nightmares and come out decorated and brave. And Ethan, who stood just a few feet away from Dad, was nodding politely, wearing a small, almost shy smile, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. A part of me froze in shock. My first impulse was to rush forward, wave my arms, and demand they explain why my experiences, my sweat and blood, were being gift-wrapped and presented to the world as Ethan's accomplishments. But I remained paralyzed by confusion, heartbreak, and sheer disbelief. Only after the wave of raw emotion passed did I step forward to catch the tail end of my father's statements. "Yeah," he said with a proud tone. "The Army was tough, but Ethan pushed through it. You should have seen the look on his face when he got that medal for valor." Then he chuckled, a deep rumble that shook his chest. He never brags about it, though. You know him, always so humble. Humble? Ethan was about as far from humble as one could get, especially when the spotlight shone on him. It dawned on me that this wasn't the first time. This had happened before small references, claims to medals that, for some reason, people attributed to him. I used to shrug it off, thinking it was a misunderstanding or some rumor. But this time, my father was obviously comfortable doing it, weaving a tapestry of my life around my brother's name. My mother was beside them, nodding in agreement, wearing a look of pride mixed with relief, as if she'd just exhaled a breath she'd been holding for months. When I drew closer and cleared my throat, they looked at me with startled eyes. Perhaps there was a flicker of guilt in their expressions, but it vanished so quickly. I wasn't sure if I imagined it. My father laid a hand on Ethan's shoulder, beaming. "You remember your cousin, Jeff," Dad said, ignoring my presence for a moment. "I was just telling him about your last deployment." Then he swung his gaze to me, forcing a mild smile. "Oh, Ava, hello. Were you looking for your mother and me?" I swallowed, the dryness in my throat making it hard to speak. Instead of confronting them publicly right then, I forced a neutral expression and nodded. "Yes, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to see if you needed anything." That was all I managed. I retreated soon after, feeling the hot rush of tears threatening to break free at the corners of my eyes. My hands were trembling, my stomach twisted in knots. Why would they do this? I wondered. Why would they give Ethan my stories, my entire Army success, when I'd worked so hard? The question reverberated inside my mind, setting the stage for the heartbreak, betrayal, and eventual thirst for justice that would unravel in the days to come. I left the reunion soon after, my heart hollow, my anger mounting. I wanted answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter the cost. In the days following that crushing reunion, I returned to my parents' home under the guise of a simple visit. It wasn't unusual for me to pop by, though after my last deployment, I usually needed some space to adjust. This time, however, I had a burning need to clear the air, confront them, and unravel the twisted web of stolen honor I'd just stumbled upon. My parents lived in a comfortable single-story house, surrounded by a well-maintained garden. Roses, daisies, and a small plot of sunflowers brightened the yard, while the inside was meticulously clean, reflecting my mother's need for order. I arrived on a warm afternoon when the sun shimmered across the pavement. Sweat dotted my forehead as I climbed out of the car. My mother greeted me in the kitchen, wearing her usual warm smile, though something in her eyes seemed guarded. She insisted on making me a cup of tea and a sandwich, an offer I couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. While she busied herself, I glanced around the living room. Photographs of family moments, birthdays, graduations, Christmas gatherings adorned the walls. Some pictures featured Ethan shaking hands with men in suits, but none reflected any military service. That part of our family's life, my life, was conspicuously absent. There was no mention of my basic training graduation, no framed medals or awards, no proud snapshots of my promotions. I mulled over all this as I sipped my tea. Soon, my father emerged from the hallway. "Ava," he said, voice smooth as always. "It's good to see you again. How's civilian life treating you?" His question stung more than he probably intended, but I forced a half smile. "It's been an adjustment," I replied, "but I'm fine, Dad. Actually, I wanted to talk to you and Mom about something that came up during the reunion." My mother shot my father a quick, uneasy glance. He crossed his arms, leaning against the doorway. "Oh, that get-together was a blast, wasn't it? Everyone was so happy to see you and Ethan." There, again, I felt the quiet overshadowing. They were so happy to see you and Ethan. It was as if the actual specifics of my achievements were a taboo subject. I mustered my courage. "Dad, Mom, I overheard you talking about Ethan's Army service. You mentioned deployments, medals, even the rocket attack I survived. Why were you telling people those things happened to him?" "They happened to me." An uncomfortable silence fell across the kitchen. My mother set her tea down, her hand trembling, and my father stepped away from the doorway. Their faces betrayed a fleeting mixture of guilt and fear. Then my father cleared his throat, speaking slowly. "Ava, you know we're proud of you, but it's complicated. People don't always understand a woman's place in the Army. The family, especially your grandparents, they get worried or even disapprove. We didn't want you to be the subject of strange gossip or scrutiny." A wave of anger roared through me. My voice cracked. "So you decided it was better to lie? To give Ethan credit for everything I did? That's not complicated, Dad, that's betrayal." My eyes slid to my mother, who was visibly upset, tears brimming. "You went along with this, Mom? Why?" she sniffed, pressing her lips into a thin line. "You don't understand the pressure we've been under. At first, it was just a small way to avoid conflict, to shield you. We thought you deserved peace, not endless prying. People judged us for letting our daughter go off to dangerous war zones. Then, Ethan. Well, he said it didn't matter who got the credit, that the family name was the same. We never expected it to escalate like this." I wanted to scream. Instead, I clasped my trembling hands in my lap. "You do realize that belittles everything I've done. I risked my life. I lost friends. I came back with nightmares and memories that keep me up at night, just so you could turn around and hand those experiences to Ethan like a gift?" Neither of them spoke. The pause was thick enough to slice with a knife. Eventually, my mother swallowed. "Ava, we love you. We're sorry if you feel invisible, but maybe, for the sake of family harmony, we can keep this matter quiet." "Does it really hurt you that much?" Anger surged, so potent it blurred my vision. I stood, my heart thundering in my ears. Yes, Mom, it does, I spat, voice quivering. You're erasing me. You're killing my identity. Everything I've worked for is being paraded around as Ethan's. I can't accept that. My words echoed in the still air, the final statement lingering before I turned on my heel and marched out the door. Behind me, I heard only silence, broken by a soft sob that might have come from my mother. I slammed the door, each step to my car a reminder that things had changed forever. My parents had chosen to publicly deny me in favor of upholding some bizarre social facade. I wasn't going to let it go. But at that point, I had no idea just how deep this betrayal would run, or how ugly things were destined to become. Ethan was staying in a modern condominium complex on the other side of town, far from our parents. He claimed it was to maintain independence, but I suspected he also enjoyed the added prestige of a swanky address. After speaking to my parents, it was impossible not to corner my brother for a heart-to-heart, or maybe a heated argument. I needed him to explain his side of the story, because part of me still couldn't believe he would go along with such a grand deception without protest. Outside his building, palm trees swayed in the warm breeze. The sun glinted off pristine windows, and the faint sound of traffic buzzed from the highway beyond. I buzzed his unit number and waited, arms crossed. It took a moment for him to answer, and when he did, his voice crackled through the intercom. "Who is it?" "It's me," I replied sharply. "We need to talk." Silence, then a buzz unlocking the door. I marched up to the second floor, where he was standing in the hallway, arms folded across his chest. He looked marginally uneasy, but he offered no immediate apology or explanation. His short hair was styled precisely, his designer t-shirt too crisp and clean for someone who supposedly had endured army deployments. I felt my irritation spike. He motioned for me to follow him into his apartment, which was tastefully decorated with leather furniture, abstract paintings, and expensive electronics. The moment the door closed behind me, I rounded on him. "You want to explain to me why our parents are telling everyone you served in the army, Ethan? Why Dad is bragging that you survived rocket attacks and pinned on medals for valor, when that was me?" He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "Look, Ava, I never explicitly told them to do it. They started telling the story in small bits to a few people, and it kind of spiraled. By the time I realized how widespread it was too late to correct them without causing a huge rift in the family." My nostrils flared. "Are you kidding me? It's never too late to correct a lie. You just have to open your mouth and say, actually, it was Ava who served, but you didn't, you let it go. And let's not pretend you're not enjoying the admiration, the applause, the hero worship." He shrugged, looking away. His silence was damning. "It's complicated, Ava. Mom and Dad think it's easier for people to accept a son as a soldier rather than a daughter. You know how they are. They always tried to push you into safer, more traditionally feminine roles. They told me they needed this to avoid judgment from relatives, from the neighbors, from their church groups. It sounds stupid, I know, but they said it was for the greater good. They said you wouldn't mind." "I wouldn't mind?" My voice came out in a furious hiss. "You have no idea how much I mind, Ethan. All those years of sweat, the punishing training, the combat stress, that's my life. Do you have any clue what it feels like to know your own parents didn't want to brag about you because you're a woman? That they slapped your identity onto their precious son because it's more socially acceptable?" He looked down, perhaps ashamed, perhaps just uncomfortable. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "I'm not proud of this. I never asked for it." "But you went along with it," I countered. "And you continued to go along with it, letting it spiral." "You're complicit, Ethan." His head snapped up, defensiveness in his eyes. "Let's be real. You've always been Dad's second choice. He never wanted you in the army. You insisted, and you were good at it. But that didn't mean he approved. He might love you, but he doesn't understand you. If it's any consolation, he doesn't understand me either. He just sees me as a tool, the son who can do no wrong. And for a while, I liked that. I relished it, all right? Yes, it was fun to get patted on the back, but I didn't realize how deeply it would hurt you." My throat tightened. Anger, frustration, pain, they churned within me. You might be telling me you're sorry, but I don't see any willingness to fix this. You're going to keep letting them rewrite my story. That's not an apology. That's a justification. He took a step closer, his eyes somewhat regretful. I don't know what to do. If we confess now, Mom and Dad will be humiliated in front of everyone. Our extended family, the neighbors, the entire circle of acquaintances, they'll all judge them for lying. It'll tear them apart, maybe tear us apart too. I snorted, bitterness creeping into my tone. And you think we're not already torn apart? You've stolen my identity. You think that doesn't devastate me? He opened his mouth but had no quick answer. Finally, with a sigh, he murmured, I'm sorry, Ava. I stared at him, trying to decide if I saw a shred of genuine remorse or just a desire to keep the peace. My stomach turned over with disgust. I'm not here for your apology, Ethan. I'm here to warn you. I'm not letting this stand. It's my story, my accomplishments, my life. If you won't come clean, I will. And to hell with the consequences. He didn't stop me as I stormed out, my heels clicking on the polished hallway floor. For a moment, I felt a surge of power, a sense of righteous anger fueling me. But beneath that righteous fury lay something more fragile and painful betrayal by my own flesh and blood. That night, I tossed and turned in my small apartment. My mind was assaulted by flashbacks of my service, moments I rarely allowed myself to revisit. Memories flickered behind my eyelids, punctuated by the dull hum of the box fan next to my bed. I saw the day I first stepped into basic training, the scorching sun beating down on us recruits as we stood at attention. My heart had pounded with anticipation, fear, and pride. Drill sergeants barked orders, demanding discipline and grit. I had no illusions being a woman in a traditionally male-dominated environment wouldn't be easy. But I felt a fierce determination. I wanted to break barriers. I wanted to show that I could carry the same weight, shoot with the same precision, and stand guard with the same unwavering resolve as any man. Then I recalled the day I earned my marksmanship badge, the thunderous recoil of the rifle still vivid in my muscles. The adrenaline coursing through me was both exhilarating and terrifying. I'd shot targets with an uncanny focus, pushing aside exhaustion and doubts. The sense of triumph I felt when I was awarded that badge was overwhelming. I remembered calling my parents, voice crackling with excitement over the phone, only to receive lukewarm congratulations and a cautious warning, just stay safe, Ava, and think about a more fitting profession once your term ends. The flashbacks moved on, fast-forwarding to my first deployment. The memory of setting foot on foreign soil under the scorching sun made my skin tingle with phantom heat. The gritty sand got into everything: my boots, my hair, my mouth. The daily routine was a grueling cycle of patrols, operational briefings, maintenance checks, and the ever-present vigilance that came with being in a war zone. Nights were the worst for me. A cacophony of howling winds and rumbling vehicles, distant gunfire sometimes interrupting my sleep. But I developed a sense of camaraderie with my fellow soldiers, men and women who didn't give a damn about my gender so long as I could do my job. And I could do my job. Well, memories continued to flicker, the smell of dust, sweat-soaked uniforms, and the weight of gear digging into my shoulders. I remembered the rocket attack that almost ended my life. The shrieking alarm, the scramble for cover, the deafening explosions that rattled my teeth. I felt the concussive force slam me against the sandbags. A friend of mine, Harlow, dragged me behind a reinforced wall. My heart hammered like a machine gun. I'd come away with minor cuts and bruises, but the mental scarring was deep. How many times had I replayed that moment, thinking I might die far from home, far from my own country's soil? Now, that memory was being claimed by my brother, as though he had been the one to take that risk. That outraged me, but it also caused a profound sadness. Those experiences had shaped me, for better or worse, and I had the nightmares to prove it. Some nights, I startled awake, sweat-soaked, convinced I was still under attack. I sat up in bed, my breath ragged in the darkness. I stared at the faint glow of the streetlight through my blinds, grappling with the realization that my parents didn't want to celebrate these sacrifices because they were mine, because I was their daughter and not their son. My mother had once told me how, as a child, I'd climb trees with the neighborhood boys, skinned knees be damned, while she'd wished I'd just come inside and play with dolls or help her bake cookies. I'd laughed it off then, but now I understood that their disappointment ran deeper than I'd allowed myself to see. When I did sleep again, my dreams were restless. Scenes of war morphed into images of my parents' living room. Photos of Ethan in a military uniform replaced pictures of me in my fatigues. My father pointed proudly to them while my mother just shook her head at me. I woke up at dawn, my pillow damp with tears, resolved that I was done being invisible. With my decision to fight back taking shape, I realized I needed support. Doing it alone would invite mental and emotional strain, not to mention the risk of a family implosion if I tried to handle everything in secret. So I reached out to the people who genuinely knew my story, the men and women I served with. Most of them were scattered across the country, but we were connected through social media and the occasional phone call or text. One of the first I contacted was Harlow, the soldier who had pulled me to safety during the rocket attack. Since leaving the service, she'd moved to another state and started an engineering job. I sent her a lengthy message explaining the situation, my feelings of betrayal, and my plan to set the record straight. She replied almost immediately, her words brimming with disbelief and outrage. "Your parents are doing what?" she wrote. "That's insane, Ava. How can they pretend Ethan served in your place? Unbelievable." Her words provided the validation I needed, a reminder that I wasn't overreacting. Next, I called Ramirez, another close friend from my unit. We'd gone through basic together, forging a tight bond born of countless shared hardships and inside jokes. He listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a whispered curse as I described how my parents had recast my entire service record. He told me not to despair. "You deserve the credit, Ava," he said. "You bled for it. You can't let anyone take that from you, not even family." As I reached out to more people, I found overwhelming sympathy and support. Some were furious on my behalf, others were incredulous, but all agreed that I had every right to set the story straight. A few suggested I make a public post on social media, tagging everyone involved, but I wasn't ready for that. It felt too crude, too explosive. I wanted to handle this with some measure of dignity, although a small part of me craved a dramatic public reckoning. Maybe I needed time to figure out the best approach. That weekend, I invited a handful of old Army pals who lived nearby to meet me at a local sports bar. The place was loud, filled with the scent of greasy wings and the sound of roaring TVs. But in a back booth, we huddled together. There was Franklin, tall and broad-shouldered, who'd once carried me half a mile when I sprained my ankle on a training exercise. Next to him was Pearson, a sniper who had eyes like a hawk and an odd sense of humor that had kept morale alive during stressful missions. Across from them sat Nguyen, who'd served as a combat medic and had a heart of gold. Each of them brought their own stories of Mimi in uniform, proof that I wasn't dreaming all this up. I laid out the situation in more detail, how my parents systematically recast me as a civilian daughter and Ethan as the Army hero. The group's reactions were a chorus of expletives and headshakes. "And your brother doesn't see a problem with this?" Franklin asked, scowling. I frowned, fiddling with the condensation on my beer glass. "He claims he feels guilty, but not guilty enough to put a stop to it." Pearson let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's cowardice, plain and simple, letting you suffer while he basks in the limelight." We debated different tactics, a formal letter, an intervention-style family meeting, or a quiet correction behind the scenes. But each time, the group arrived at the same conclusion: I needed to be direct and unequivocal. Harlow chimed in via video call at one point, her voice crackling over the bar's Wi-Fi. "They stole your story, Ava, so you need to reclaim it publicly if necessary. If your parents don't accept that, then they're choosing a lie over their daughter's truth." Despite the anger in the booth, a current of concern ran deep. Franklin placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Just be careful. Families can unravel in nasty ways when secrets come out. But you're not alone, okay? We've got your back. I swallowed a lump of gratitude, blinking back tears. Their unwavering support reminded me of the camaraderie we'd shared in the army. It was that same solidarity that had kept me sane during deployments. After we parted ways, I stood in the parking lot, the neon bar sign flickering overhead, feeling a peculiar mixture of dread and resolve. One thing was certain: I wasn't going to remain silent. Armed with encouragement from my old army comrades, I tried one more round of personal diplomacy with my parents. I knocked on their door Sunday afternoon, a calm, clear day. Birds chirped in the yard, and the sun lit up the bright flowers along their fence. The serene environment felt at odds with the turbulence roiling inside me. My mother answered, face etched with worry the moment she saw me. She led me into the living room, where my father sat reading a newspaper. He glanced up, adjusting his reading glasses, an uncertain smile on his lips. Clearly, the tension from our last conversation still lingered. I spoke evenly, deliberately. I want to talk about the army thing again, and I'm not leaving until we settle this. My father set the paper aside. Ava, please don't upset your mother. She's been stressed. I bit back a retort, focusing on my mother's anxious expression. Mom, Dad, I know you think you're protecting me from scrutiny or gossip, but you're not. You're erasing me. I've spoken to my army friends, and they all agree this can't continue. I need you to tell the truth, publicly, about who served and who earned the honors. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, but she pressed her lips together. My father spoke instead, his tone a strange mixture of impatience and paternal protectiveness. We didn't ask for this to become a big issue. It started out as a small deflection. People ask about our kids, and we tell them about the army because it's a significant achievement. It just felt more natural to say Ethan served. My anger flared. You mean more acceptable to your traditional worldview, I snapped. He raised a hand, a signal for me to lower my voice. Stop twisting our words. You know we love you, but not everyone is open-minded about a woman going into combat. I scoffed, frustration boiling over. That's their problem, not mine. And definitely not your excuse to lie. Also, has it ever occurred to you that you're reinforcing those prejudices by hiding my service? My mother wiped at her eyes, her voice quivering. Your father and I were always worried about you. We thought you might come home with injuries, with nightmares. You did, in some ways. It's been painful to see you struggle. We couldn't bear the thought of repeating the details, seeing people's shocked faces, hearing the whispers. So maybe at first we said Ethan was the soldier to avoid reliving your trauma. A pang of sympathy flickered in my chest. I understood fear and worry, but my sympathy was short-lived when my father spoke again, frustration evident. Look, we're in too deep. Everyone believes Ethan served. If we reverse course now, we'd look like fools or liars. And I'm not sure if that's worth it for a matter of credit. The dismissive tone stung more than any physical blow. I drew a sharp breath, tears of anger pricking my eyes. It's not just credit, Dad. It's my identity, my sense of self. My entire adult life has revolved around that service. You'd rather keep up a facade than acknowledge your own daughter's bravery? His gaze faltered briefly, but he hardened his expression. This is bigger than you realize. Our reputation, our extended family, all of them have accepted this story for years now. We can't just flip a switch. I straightened my spine, my heart pounding. I can, and I will. If you won't come clean, I'll do it for you. I'll host a family gathering, or I'll post on social media. I'll spread the truth to everyone. This stops here. My mother shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. That will tear us apart, Ava. You'll humiliate your father, humiliate Ethan. People won't trust us anymore. Then maybe you should have thought of that before weaving this web of lies, I replied, my voice trembling with pent-up rage and hurt. I turned to leave, passing the rows of family photos that never once showcased my service. I gave you a chance to fix this peacefully. If you still won't, don't say I didn't warn you. As I stepped out into the sunshine, my face hot with anger, I felt a storm of emotions swirling within me: betrayal, grief, the last remnants of a daughter's love clinging to hope. I realized that if my parents wouldn't stand up for me, I'd have to stand up for myself. The cost might be the final shred of our family harmony, but that harmony was a lie, anyway. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor on a blank social media status. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, wavering between certainty and dread. My plan was simple, if not delicate. I'd write an open letter explaining the truth, accompanied by pictures, documents, and testimonies from my army friends. The post would be visible to friends, family, and acquaintances alike, everyone who might have heard the false story or passed it around. It was a bold move, guaranteed to spark drama and confrontation. But as I began typing, my chest tightened with nerves. Once I hit post, there would be no going back. My parents and Ethan would be publicly contradicted, and the facade they'd built could crumble overnight. My mother's tearful face lingered in my mind, and guilt nibbled at my resolve. Am I doing the right thing? I wondered. Is there a more private way to handle this? I typed a few lines, describing my service history in broad strokes: basic training, deployments, certain medals I'd earned. I added a sentence about how some confusion had arisen regarding who in the family served, which I wanted to clarify. Then I paused, rereading my words. It felt too sanitized, too diplomatic, given the depth of the betrayal, yet I also didn't want to wage an all-out war on social media. The point was to reclaim my identity, not to tear my parents to shreds. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "Ava, can we talk before you do anything drastic? I heard what you told Mom and Dad. I want a chance to fix this, or at least explain some more." A flicker of curiosity burned in my gut. Maybe, just maybe, he'd found the courage to set the record straight. Against my better judgment, I decided to give him one final opportunity. I saved my draft and closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and headed out. Ethan asked to meet at a park near his condo. He sat on a bench beneath a large oak, dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. The air smelled of fresh grass and distant barbecue. Kids played on a swing set while parents watched from picnic tables. It was an odd, peaceful backdrop for a conversation laced with such tension. When I approached, he stood up, hands shoved in the pockets of his jeans. He gestured for me to sit next to him. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice subdued. "I know you don't owe me anything after what's happened." I stayed standing for a moment, evaluating him with narrowed eyes. Finally, I sat, leaving space between us. "Talk." He let out a shaky breath. "I've been thinking. I can't keep living with this guilt. I know you must hate me for letting it go on so long, but I'm afraid of what'll happen if we come clean. Mom and Dad, they practically raised me to be the golden son. I've had a lifetime of them putting me on a pedestal. It was suffocating, but also addicting. I was used to the praise. Still, that doesn't justify any of this." I folded my arms over my chest, the anger simmering. "So, what's your plan?" he grimaced. "I want to fix it. I'll start telling the truth, at least to the people in my immediate circle. I'll talk to some of our extended family. If you want me to arrange a meeting with them, I can do that. I'll say that I never served. That you did. I'll let them know there was a big misunderstanding." My eyebrows shot up. "That's all well and good. But what about Mom and Dad? Are they on board with this?" He shook his head. "Not yet. They're panicked. They still think you'll ruin them if you go public. They begged me to convince you not to. So, I guess that's partially why I called you, to see if I can buy time." "Buy time?" My tone sharpened. "Ethan, I don't want to drag this on forever. I want resolution. I'm tired of being invisible." He nodded slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I get it. I do. Look, maybe I can handle this carefully. If I can talk to enough people privately, start giving them the real story, then when the truth finally comes out, it'll be less jarring. That might spare Mom and Dad's pride, at least somewhat." "Doesn't that count for something?" I stared at him, recalling the guilt and pain I'd carried for so long. What about me, Ethan? When do I get my pride back? He swallowed, looking away, guilt etched on his features. I'm trying to do right by you now. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the giggles of children in the distance. Eventually, I said, I'm willing to give you a brief window to fix this privately. But if I sense you're stalling, or if Mom and Dad try to bury this again, I'm going public. I'm posting everything. Understood? His shoulders slumped in relief. Understood. Give me a couple of weeks, please. I rose from the bench, staring down at him. For the first time, I saw not the smug brother I'd known, but a man trapped between wanting to please everyone and knowing he'd wronged me. I felt a tug of pity quickly quashed by my own anger. 2 weeks. That's all. As the days passed, I watched the clock like a ticking time bomb. Each sunrise brought me closer to the deadline I'd given Ethan. I vacillated between hope and dread. Maybe, just maybe, he'd come through, confronting our relatives and setting the record straight. Or maybe he was simply delaying, letting tension fade so I wouldn't detonate our family's reputation. I stayed busy with job applications and part-time work, trying to rebuild my civilian life. But my thoughts inevitably drifted back to the situation. A sense of restless anticipation gnawed at me. I scanned social media for any sign of correction, a hint that my family was taking steps to rectify the lie. Instead, I found snapshots of my mother beaming at her garden club, my father posting about some town hall meeting, and Ethan out with friends at trendy restaurants. Nothing about the army, no retractions or clarifications. Meanwhile, the first started noticing subtle changes in how extended relatives interacted with me. An aunt would send me a polite message, praising me for adjusting so well to civilian life, but never once mentioning the army. A cousin posted a cryptic status about truth coming to light eventually, but refused to elaborate when I asked her privately. It felt like a powder keg that could blow at any moment. During that wait, I also noticed another troubling undercurrent. Some family members seemed to resent me. I got passive-aggressive comments implying I was trying to stir up drama. One relative sent me a pointed message. You should be proud of your brother. Why are you so upset about him getting a little recognition? Isn't family more important? The words stung, fueling my anger. I was the one who served. I deserved recognition, if anyone. But of course, they didn't know that. To maintain my sanity, I confided more often in my army friends. Harlow continued to be a pillar of support, encouraging me not to cave. Ramirez sent me funny memes when he sensed I was spiraling. Franklin offered to have a chat with Ethan, which I politely declined, not wanting an escalation. Through it all, they reinforced the notion that I was justified in my stance. A week and a half into the 2-week period, I decided to test the waters. I attended a small family barbecue, something I normally would avoid. To my surprise, my parents weren't there, only some cousins and a few aunts and uncles. And Ethan, my brother, hovered near the grill, wearing a polite smile. I approached him when the others were out of earshot. Well, I asked quietly, trying to hide my frustration. Have you talked to anyone? He hesitated, then nodded. I've told a few. Some were shocked, some just shrugged. But it's a start. I looked around, scanning the crowd. My uncle, the one who used to serve in the Navy decades ago, was chatting animatedly. Normally, he'd be curious about any military service in the family. Have you told Uncle Robert? I asked. Ethan's face fell. Not yet. He's old school. I'm worried about how he'll react. A surge of exasperation prickled at me. Don't you see that's exactly the problem? Mom and Dad were always terrified of people's reactions, so they told a lie. Now you're doing the same. Grow a spine, Ethan. He looked pained, eyes dropping to the grass. I know. I'm sorry. I'm trying. I walked away, not wanting to make a scene at the barbecue, but my patience was wearing thin. The turning point arrived when I stumbled upon evidence that my parents were actively reinforcing the lie. Late one night, I got a direct message from a distant cousin, Jana, who lived out of state. She was an avid genealogist, always digging into the family tree and updating some massive digital archive. Her tone was friendly yet urgent. Hey, Ava, quick question. I was doing some updates to our family's veterans records. Your dad confirmed that Ethan served from 2012 to 2020 with 2 deployments. I wanted to see if you had any photos or documents we could add. It's so cool that we have another soldier in the family. Grandpa was in Korea, Dad was in Vietnam, and now Ethan. Let's keep the tradition alive, right? I stared at the message, my hands trembling with outrage. My father had not only perpetuated the lie, he'd actively gone out of his way to document it in the official family history. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. This wasn't just a rumor. They were carving the lie into stone, rewriting my entire life story as if I had never stepped foot in uniform. I typed a response with shaking fingers. Jana, there must be a misunderstanding. I'm the one who served from 2012 to 2020, deployed twice. Ethan never enlisted. If Dad said that, he's mistaken. Please don't add that info to the record. Seconds later, Jenna responded with confusion. Wait, your dad was adamant. It was Ethan. He never mentioned you serving. Are you sure you're not mixing things up? Rage threatened to boil over. I assure you, I wrote back. I'm not mixing anything up. I have the DD 214 discharge paperwork, photos from deployments, and contact info for my old commanding officers. I'd be happy to send them to you. Her next message took a few minutes. Wow, Ava, I'm sorry. I guess I got misled. I'd love to see whatever records you have, but this is going to cause a major rift in the family. You know that, right? I sighed, tears of frustration burning behind my eyes. Yeah, I know, I replied. But it's the truth. I can't let it stay buried. When I finished typing, I closed my laptop and sank onto my couch, heart pounding. How could my father do this? I felt a swirl of betrayal so deep it made my throat ache. I had given Ethan 2 weeks. We were nearing the end of that deadline, and this was the final straw. I decided then and there I would no longer wait. I spent the next day assembling evidence, scanned copies of my discharge paperwork, certificates of commendation, photos of me in uniform, even group pictures with my squad in the field. I wrote a concise yet detailed statement explaining that I had served, listing my dates of enlistment, my deployments, and the roles I'd held. I mentioned how misinformation had spread within my family attributing my service to Ethan. While I carefully avoided slandering my parents by name, I made it clear that the mistake had been perpetuated for too long and needed to be corrected. Then, on a quiet Tuesday evening, I hit post. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched the little status box vanish into my feed. Within minutes, notifications began to ping. My phone lit up with messages, and the comments started rolling in, some supportive, some confused, others downright shocked. Friends from the Army chimed in, confirming my account with personal anecdotes. Their remarks lent legitimacy to my statement, and soon anyone reading the thread could see a flood of testimonies from those who had served alongside me. It was undeniable proof. I felt a heady mix of relief and dread, knowing the hornet's nest I'd just kicked over. Sure enough, within half an hour, my brother called. I let it go to voicemail. His frantic texts piled up. Ava, you promised me more time, and this is gonna tear the family apart. And finally, please call me. I ignored them, mind resolute. He had promised me he would fix it, and he failed. Enough was enough. Less than an hour after posting, my mother's name appeared on my phone screen. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves, and answered. Her voice was already trembling with tears. Ava, how could you? She cried. Everyone's seeing your post, calling your father and me, saying we lied. Do you understand what you've done? My throat felt tight, but I refused to back down. Yes, Mom, I said softly but firmly. I told the truth. She sobbed, and I heard my father's voice in the background, muffled and angry. We're being humiliated. We tried to protect you, and this is how you repay us? Protect me from what? I shot back, exasperated. From being a soldier? From telling the world your daughter served her country? That's not protection. It's betrayal. I gave Ethan a chance to do this quietly. He didn't. You doubled down by telling Jana to put the lie in the family records. I have no regrets about this, Mom. Her sobbing grew more intense. My father took the phone, voice rough with fury. "Ava, you've made a spectacle of us. I hope you're proud. I hope you enjoy the attention." I clutched the phone, pressing it to my ear. "I'm not proud that I had to resort to this, Dad, but you left me no choice. I am proud of my service, and I'm done letting you rewrite it." He said something else, a swirl of accusations, but I could hardly process it through the pounding of my heart. I hung up, tears streaking down my face. The following days were a chaotic storm of phone calls, text messages, and social media commentary. Extended relatives bombarded me with questions, disbelief, or outright support. A few scolded me for embarrassing my parents publicly. Others apologized for ever believing Ethan's story. Several older relatives, including Uncle Robert, reached out in astonishment, wanting to verify the truth. Some even expressed regret for praising Ethan so effusively, never suspecting the deception. My father apparently refused to speak to anyone about it, retreating into sullen silence. My mother tried to do damage control, at first blaming a misunderstanding, then turning tearful and claiming she'd only done it out of love. Ethan made a brief social media post admitting he had never served, and that any rumors otherwise were unintentional misunderstandings, which drew mixed reactions. Many people weren't buying it, noting how he'd basked in accolades rather than correcting the narrative. Amidst the chaos, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I felt oddly liberated, though the emotional toll was immense. I'd spent years feeling overshadowed and diminished by my own parents. Now, my truth stood unshakable. The cost, however, was high. My relationship with my parents was in tatters. They were furious, humiliated, and unwilling to see how deeply they'd hurt me. I found solace in the supportive messages flooding my inbox from fellow veterans, old classmates, and even strangers who stumbled upon my post. They applauded me for standing up for myself and for women in the military everywhere. I wasn't blind to the heartbreak. Part of me had hoped that once the truth came out, my parents would realize the gravity of their actions and apologize. Instead, they seemed more concerned about saving face. I tried to focus on the positive aspects that my story was now, undeniably, my story. No one could take it away again. As the dust began to settle, an unexpected ally emerged: Uncle Robert, the old Navy man I'd once avoided discussing my service with. He called me one evening, his voice gravelly but gentle. "I read your post," he said. "I'm sorry for believing the nonsense. I had no reason to doubt your parents or Ethan, but clearly I should have. I wish I'd known about your service sooner. Maybe I could have offered some support." His words warmed me. I remembered the family gossip that said Uncle Robert was stern, even overbearing, but I found none of that in our conversation. Instead, he sounded remorseful and protective. I told him about my experiences: boot camp, overseas deployments, the near-miss rocket attack. He listened intently, occasionally interjecting with his own memories of the Navy. "I have to ask," he said finally, voice thick with emotion, "why would your parents do that?" I served alongside women who were some of the best sailors I've ever known. They earned my respect, no question. I sighed. I guess it's a mix of old-fashioned ideas and fear of judgment. They told me they were worried about the stigma or the trauma I might face, so they just decided not to tell people the truth. Then it snowballed. He let out a rueful chuckle. "Damned silly. But I can't change what they did. I can only tell you that I'm proud of you." Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you, Uncle Robert. That means more than you know." He went on to promise he'd correct anyone who repeated the lie. He even offered to speak directly to my parents, an idea I wasn't entirely sure about but appreciated nonetheless. That single call felt like a salve on a deep wound. For once, a respected elder in the family was affirming my achievements, calling them worthy of respect. Tension with my parents reached a boiling point a week after my social media post. My mother had texted me, guilt-tripping me about how she couldn't show her face at church. My father's pride was apparently shattered. Yet there'd been no acknowledgement of my service, no true apology, just accusations of betrayal and humiliation. So when they requested I come over to talk, I hesitated, but decided to face them. Their house felt suffocating the moment I walked in. The blinds were drawn, the air stagnant. My mother stood in the living room, wringing her hands. My father paced near the mantel, a scowl carved into his features. My father was the first to speak. "You've disgraced us," he said flatly. I bristled. "Actually, I've only revealed your lies. Whatever disgrace you feel, that's on you." My mother sniffled. "Ava, please. We're your parents. We did what we thought was best." I locked eyes with her, jaw set. "Did you really? Because your actions hurt me more than anyone else ever has. It was never best for me, it was best for your image." My father's scowl deepened. "Our image is your image. A family stands together. Unless the daughter is a soldier, apparently," I retorted. "Face it, Dad, you couldn't stand that I chose a path you disapproved of. You belittled my choice at every turn. This is the consequence." He paused, fists clenched at his sides. "I didn't want to see you harmed. Your mother and I were sick with worry during your tours. We prayed every night you'd come home safe. So you disguised me as Ethan? That logic is twisted," I shot back. Silence fell, thick as a storm cloud. My mother's tears slipped down her cheeks. "We made mistakes. But you didn't have to do this publicly. You've ruined our standing in the community. People are calling, asking why we lied, if we're pathological or if something else is going on. We're humiliated." I felt a pang of sorrow, but I stood firm. "I gave you chances, Mom. I tried to get you to tell the truth quietly. You refused time and time again. You literally sent false information to Jana for the family records. You forced my hand." My father rubbed his temples. "We never wanted to lose you, Ava." "Then you should have accepted me as I am," I said softly. My mother gave a broken sob, turning away. My father reached out a hand, but I stepped back. I'd had enough. "When you're truly ready to apologize and recognize my service, call me. Until then, I can't be around you." I left, my heart racked with conflicting emotions, an odd mixture of devastation, relief, and unyielding resolve. Days passed, then weeks. My posts continued to circulate, with occasional comments trickling in. Some praised me, others scolded me, and still others were simply supportive. I focused on rebuilding my life, leaning into therapy to handle the swirl of emotions left by both my military experiences and my family's betrayal. Through counseling, I found that my anger gradually gave way to a more nuanced understanding. My parents were products of a particular social and cultural mindset, but that didn't excuse what they did. It helped me empathize, but it didn't erase the pain. Ethan reached out repeatedly, sometimes apologizing, sometimes blaming me for going nuclear. I mostly ignored him, not ready to engage. However, one day he sent a message that piqued my interest. "I've talked to Mom and Dad. They're hitting rock bottom, but they keep doubling down. I'm trying to convince them to meet with you and me together to reconcile. No lies, no blame shifting, just honesty. Let me know if you're open to that." My knee-jerk reaction was to reject the idea. But therapy had encouraged me to consider healthy boundaries, not complete estrangement, if there was a chance for genuine reconciliation. With a cautious heart, I replied, "I'm willing if they are, but I won't accept anything less than a real apology and real accountability." He simply responded, "Understood." A few weeks later, I found myself pulling into a neutral location, a small event space owned by a mutual acquaintance. It was a single room with a long wooden table, folding chairs, and an air conditioner humming in the background. I arrived first, accompanied by Franklin, who offered moral support but agreed to wait outside unless things escalated. Ethan arrived next, wearing a nervous expression. We exchanged minimal pleasantries, the tension thick. Then my parents walked in, looking worn and apprehensive. My father's hair seemed grayer than before, and my mother's eyes were red-rimmed. We all sat around the table, no one speaking for several excruciating seconds. Ethan cleared his throat. "Mom, Dad, Ava, I asked for this meeting because we need to address the fallout head-on. There's been too much pain and misunderstanding, And lying, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm listening. My mother fiddled with a tissue in her hands. Ava, I'm sorry, she said softly. I realize we hurt you deeply. It started as a small thing, then we let it snowball, and we never believed it would matter so much. But it did. It mattered to you more than we understood. Her words, tentative though they were, made my eyes sting with tears. Thank you for acknowledging that, I managed. My father exhaled, eyes drifting between me and the table's edge. I was wrong, he began, voice halting. I didn't think about what I was doing to you. I was afraid of how people would judge a female soldier, or how they'd criticize our family for letting you go into harm's way. But mostly I was angry you chose a path I didn't approve. And I couldn't stand the questions, the pity, or the concern, so I found it easier to shift the attention to Ethan. I'm sorry, truly. His admission, raw and unpolished, tore at me. I recalled all the times I'd wished for just a scrap of validation from him. I searched his eyes for sincerity. I found at least some measure of it there. You have no idea how much damage that did to me, I whispered. He nodded, pain flashing in his gaze. I see that now. Every phone call, every mention at family gatherings, it was all built on a lie. It's no wonder you felt erased. My mother dabbed her eyes, voice shaking. We know we can't just fix this overnight. We might never undo the hurt. But, Ava, we want a chance. We want to do better, to earn your forgiveness. I looked at Ethan, who wore a mournful expression. And you? I asked pointedly. He raised his hands, palms up, as though in surrender. I'm sorry, Ava. I should have stopped it, should have come clean the first time Dad told someone I served. But I was enjoying the praise, even though it didn't belong to me. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't undo that, but I hope we can move forward. A heavy silence fell, broken by the hum of the air conditioner. My heart pounded. Forgiveness was a tall order after such betrayal, but I also recognized that this was genuine accountability, perhaps the first time. They were acknowledging the lie, acknowledging the hurt. That was a huge shift from the defensive posture they'd taken before. I appreciate you saying all this, I said, voice trembling. But words aren't enough. What are you going to do to make it right? My father exchanged a glance with my mother. We'll tell everyone the truth as best we can, he replied. We'll reach out to those we misled, apologize directly. We'll make sure Jana updates the family records. We'll do whatever it takes. Ethan nodded. I'll do the same. I'll talk to people in my social circles who still believe the lie. I'll let them know it was never true. I'll support you in any way I can. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were equal parts relief and lingering hurt. I gave a short nod. That's a start. In the weeks that followed, my parents and Ethan made good on their promise. One by one, relatives, family friends, and community members were informed of the truth. My parents wrote a formal letter to Jana, which she posted alongside her digital records, clarifying that I was the one who served in the Army. Uncle Robert called to congratulate me again, and to commend my parents for finally stepping up. Some acquaintances seemed confused by the entire saga, but most either applauded the honesty or shrugged it off, focusing on the present. As for my mother and father, they faced a mix of reactions, some supportive, some critical. The church community they'd been so worried about turned out to be surprisingly compassionate. Several members said they had suspected something was off but hadn't wanted to meddle. My father's pride took the hardest hit, but he slowly adapted, learning to express a genuine, if still cautious, admiration for my service. My mother continued to wrestle with guilt, but she tried to show contrition by actively asking me about my experiences and looking at my photos and medals. She was horrified by some of the more graphic stories of war, but she didn't flinch away. For the first time, she wanted to know my truth. Ethan, true to his word, posted on his social media platforms, admitting the lie in detail, praising me for my bravery, and acknowledging his own part in the deception. We had a tearful conversation on the phone after that. He seemed genuinely regretful, though it would take time for trust to rebuild. I still felt a pang of betrayal whenever I remembered his smug face at that reunion, standing beside Dad while the two of them claimed my stories as his. But at least now he was trying to make amends. And me? I felt free. My identity as a soldier, a veteran, a woman who had faced combat, no one could ever take that away again. The nightmares didn't disappear, but at least the burden of secrecy was gone. I could heal in the open, without the added pain of watching someone else celebrated for what I had endured. Months passed, and the family slowly approached a fragile new normal. Holidays were still tense, but there was an unspoken effort to show respect for my experiences. During Thanksgiving at my parents' house, I caught my father glancing at me with a mixture of pride and guilt. When I walked over, he cleared his throat. "Ava," he began. I found these in the attic. Thought you might want them." He handed me a stack of letters, handwritten notes I'd sent from overseas, never opened. I felt my heart twist. "You never read them?" He looked away, voice rough. "I was too scared. Too scared I'd read something about you being in danger. Or maybe I was scared of how proud I'd feel, and I didn't want to accept that I was proud of you for doing something I didn't approve of. I'm sorry." I held the letters to my chest, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for keeping them, at least." My mother joined us, gently resting a hand on my father's shoulder. "We want to do better, Ava. We really do." I nodded, tears warming my eyes. That's all I've ever wanted. Later that evening, as the family gathered around for dessert, Uncle Robert raised a toast. "To Ava, who served this country with honor. We're proud of you." The others lifted their glasses, and I saw my parents exchange a soft look before joining the toast. It was a quiet moment of redemption, the kind of recognition I'd once craved. While it didn't erase the past, it made the present more bearable, even hopeful. With my identity reclaimed, I found new purpose in advocating for female veterans. I started volunteering at a local center that offered resources and counseling for women who had served. Sharing my story and hearing theirs became a form of healing. I spoke on panels about the unique challenges we faced, from combat roles to reintegration into civilian life. My experience of being erased by my own parents highlighted just how deep-rooted societal biases could be. I channeled my anger into activism, pushing for greater awareness and respect for women in uniform. The local newspaper caught wind of my story, though I declined a full interview to avoid sensationalizing family drama. Still, a brief mention described my time in service and how I'd overcome personal and social barriers. My parents read it, and, for once, they seemed proud rather than embarrassed. Slowly, we inched toward a new relationship, fragile. Yes, but based on honesty rather than deception. Ethan also took steps to reconcile. He attended a few events I organized for veterans, quietly supporting me from the sidelines. He admitted feeling out of place among actual service members, but he did his best to listen and learn. One day, he pulled me aside. "I can never fully make this up to you," he said, his voice filled with remorse, "but I'd like to donate time and money to support these programs." Maybe that's a start? It was. I accepted his gesture, grateful for his sincerity. We still had a long road to rebuilding trust, but the seeds of real brotherly love were there, watered by regret and a newfound respect. Time has a way of blending memories into a softer tapestry. The betrayals and heartaches I endured at the hands of my parents and brother did not disappear, but the edges dulled as healing began. My parents publicly recognized that I was the one who served, that I was the soldier who fought bravely and returned with invisible wounds. My brother stopped posing in my shadow and instead helped shine a light on the achievements of women in the military. In a final gesture of genuine contrition, my parents hosted a gathering, a modest ceremony at the same country club where I'd first overheard them bragging about Ethan's service. This time, they invited extended family and close friends for a more honest celebration. They displayed pictures of me in uniform, me with my squad, me receiving my commendations. My father took the mic, voice shaking with nerves and emotion, admitting that I was the hero he'd once hidden. My mother stood by his side, tears in her eyes but a small, proud smile on her lips. Ethan also spoke, apologizing for his role and praising me not just as a soldier, but as a sister with more courage than he'd ever possessed. Finally, they handed me the microphone, and I hesitated, overwhelmed by the applause and the surge of gratitude in my chest. Tears gathered at the corners of my eyes. I never expected to stand here, I began, my voice resonating through the hall. And I never wanted this to become a spectacle, but life can be complicated and we make mistakes. The important part is owning up to them, learning from them, and moving forward together. My journey in the Army was difficult but meaningful. I'm proud of my service. And today, I'm thankful that my family is finally proud of it too. Applause thundered, and I felt a rush of warmth and closure. In that moment, I sensed justice had been served. The truth was out, and the rift in my family was on a path to healing. It would never be perfect, scars remain. But at least now, the story belonged to the rightful person. I belonged to myself. The sweet taste of vindication blended with the fragile hope of reconciliation, forming something deeply comforting, a sense that despite all the pain, love could still triumph when honesty guided the way. As I left the stage to embrace my tearful mother, with my father clapping me on the back and Ethan standing by, I felt something like peace settle over me. The lie that once erased me had been dismantled. My sacrifice, my courage, and my truth stood tall, recognized and respected. In that resonant moment, I knew a beautiful justice had been achieved, a justice that came not by destroying my family, but by forcing them to see the real me, the soldier daughter they had once feared acknowledging. And so, the ending was a just one: truth over falsehood, recognition over silence, and the power of love tempered by honesty. My parents learned their lesson, my brother atoned, and I finally stood in the rightful spotlight, proud and unashamed, an Army veteran with a story all my own.